Every club.
Every day.
The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Global Sports Podcast Network daily English Premier League show. It's your club, every day. I'm Marcus Ramtol. I'm joined by Mikey Thompson.
How are you, Pat? You okay?
Yeah, good to see you again. And of course, Nick Bird joins us as well.
It's good to be back with you again.
Yes, and it is Forecast Friday. We're going to take a look at all of the games coming up in match day 26 of 38. Can you believe it, guys? We're closing in. Is it fair to say yet? Do you reckon that it's the business end of the season?
I think with Liverpool's run, it feels like the business end.
Yeah, I've got my Liverpool blinkers on. I think perhaps Mikey can't wait for the season to end.
Yeah, absolutely. As a spectacle, though, it's coming into quite an interesting time. There's European football up for grabs, and there's not a lot of difference between those teams. I think the title race is pretty much a done deal, but crazier things have happened, although people haven't caught up from this stage ever. So good luck to Aston.
Well, not too much good luck. It's match day 26. Everybody's in action. Leicester will play Brentford during the 5 o'clock kickoff. And then on Saturday afternoon, 12:30, we'll head over to that new stadium at Everton. Very nice, very nice. Everton will host Manchester United. A few of the Toffees fans are already calling it the best stadium in Europe. I've not been, I can't comment. But tough away day for Manchester United, Mikey?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to go about this apart from being depressed. 14 players at 15 in the league. It's a 3-pointer. You know, if Everton win this game, United are cementing their position at the foot of the table. And let's be honest, United aren't going to go down. So, and I don't want to really just talk about them. I think it's really important to mention David Moyes and the impact he has had at Everton since coming in. The run of form has been phenomenal. And as a United team, you're going up against a team that are in a rich vein of form, and fair play to them, because Everton were one of the favourites to go down until Moyes picked them up. And that's completely done a U-turn. So absolutely fair play to him. And I can't wait until the Ruben Amorim effect has the same desired input.
I mean, he's got 4 wins in his first 6. And I was looking, Amorim's got 4 wins in his first 14. Like, it's so weird to look at, especially when, I mean, you said they got Moyes in and they're suddenly, you're not even considering them for relegation anymore. The amount of teams that sacked their manager before Everton and for some reason didn't get him. You're looking at Leicester in particular for me. They get rid of Cooper, who was doing fine. They were out of the relegation zone when they sacked him. They couldn't get Van Nistelrooy almost because he did all right for a few games at United. And they've won, one game in their last 10? I don't know how teams are still ignoring Moyes.
Yeah, it's quite something actually, because even the fact that he was kind of got rid of from West Ham, you know, we were not so long ago, Mikey, on this podcast saying, well, what do you want, West Ham fans? He's won you a trophy in Europe. And West Ham fans are quite vocal. Do you know what? He was the right guy at the right time, but now we need to kick on. And, we will talk about West Ham because they've got a tricky away fixture as well. You're quite right. I'm never a fan of mid-season sackings. I don't think they tend to work out very well at all. I was a big fan of Sean Dyche. I thought he was the right man to keep Everton up. But the Moyes effect is in full force, as we saw in the last Goodison derby, much to my distress and mayhem. Great game to see out Goodison, though. Well, fantastic football game. I've got to say, I can't see anything but an Everton win. What do you reckon, Nick?
I'm the same. I mean, I see it looking, Ahmad's scored 50% of the goals under Amorim. He's obviously not going to be there for the rest of the year. I don't see anything apart from an Everton win either. Beto continuing scoring somehow. I think this could be quite comfortable for Everton.
It's incredible to think that. Mikey, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I was just thinking then, was it the Garnacho over a kick last season? This game last season?
Yeah. Was that last
Yes.
year or I think it was last year.
Was it? I
Yeah.
can't remember. I lose track with time, but something like that would be nice. But even that game, thinking back to that beautiful overhead kick, United were on the back foot until that happened, and like a spontaneity of brilliance changed the crux of the game. I reckon it'll be a score draw me, if not an Everton win. But that's just on hope. I'm clinging there to something.
clinging on. We can discuss Man United's woes and Everton's rebirth at length. I'm sure the other Global Sports Podcast Network shows will do that. The Everton show and the Man United show. Going on through the afternoon, the 3:00 kickoff. Moyes' old side, West Ham, who have not travelled well at all, will go to the Emirates to face Arsenal, who, despite Havertz being injured and no striker, had a decent win at the weekend. Nick,
Yeah, it was awful for 80 minutes, and then our new hero up front just like I was saying before we started recording. Every time I think about it, I just start laughing. Like it was our funniest win I've seen in so long. Like this guy, to be fair to him, he kind of has the attributes for it, and we were saying he took the goals incredibly well.
he really did.
I remember seeing before we signed him, it's like the highest amount of aerial duels won or something. And when you compare how he took the header to how we've seen Havertz taking headers this season, like I'm not convinced Havertz would have scored that first goal, nor particularly stayed sort of away from the defence without them realising for the second one. So he did so well. There's a bit of conversation whether we should start him or whether it's more of a substitution thing. But I don't really know how.
Trossard moved further out to the left, didn't he?
Yeah.
And I think that made a lot of difference. And I think the second goal, you could see the pitch was kind of being stretched. I think he deserves a start. He took his goals very well, and we were saying before we hit record, as a Liverpool fan, I won't name any names. You've got to take your chances. You really want people to take their chances when they get a shot at goal. But Arsenal's youth, it just continues to impress me. Lewis Skelly had a great kind of last-ditch Bobby Moore-esque tackle at the back, and Ethan Manieri continues to not just impress and dazzle, but actually look really composed.
I mean, he doesn't look 17 on the pitch. Like, considering the players out there, he was by far the best player carrying the team. There's been a lot of criticism lately for Ødegaard and how he hasn't stepped up in Saka's absence. I thought he was better in the second half, but it's Waneri carrying this team at the moment. And he has this trademark finish already. We saw it last year from Foden. It's very similar. And he almost did the same last week. Like, this kid's ridiculous.
Yeah, Arsenal's youth is very impressive at the moment. Mikey, West Ham United. The last time they won away from home was at Newcastle in November. If you're a Hammers fan going to the Emirates, are you just damage limitation?
Yeah, I think so. Set up to defend is what I would do, and hope for a counter attack or a free kick corner. I was just thinking then, from when you were speaking, how big a game this is for Arsenal. I think this could decide the title, and I know that sounds quite dramatic, but anything other than an Arsenal win, you'd think this was the weekend where they could claw some of the gap back on Liverpool. If there was anything, in the calendar that you could see as an opportunity, you'd look at this one. With it being a London derby as well, it just has another edge to it. West Ham, as you've said, have coming off a really poor run of form. But when you look at the games that they've had, they've had some tricky games. So like they've played Chelsea, and I know they're inconsistent, but at times Chelsea can be on fire and playing well. Brentford have hit a great run of form this season, and they've played them and only lost 1-0. So and they played Villa, drew 1-1 at Villa, and then Palace as well. So yeah, I just think don't maybe write off West Ham just yet, but I'd expect an Arsenal win considering what it could do to the title challenge.
Yeah, and I think West Ham will be up for scuppering some Arsenal fans' hopes and dreams as well. That London Stadium game actually was pretty feisty, pretty scrappy. So, if you're not in the UK, you might be able to watch it with the 3 p.m. blackout. But unfortunately, we'll have to wait for Match of the Day or YouTube for the highlights. Before we look at the rest of the games at the weekend, let's hear about Bioniq.
Your body is unique. And Global Sports Podcast Network has partnered with Bioniq, the world's most personalised supplements. Bioniq provide 100% tailor-made supplements designed to deliver precisely what your body needs at exactly the right levels to optimise your health. No guessing. So click the link in the show notes. Use the code GSPN2025 for 40% off your first month's subscription. Bioniq. Don't settle for off-the-shelf solutions made for just anybody. Get what's right for you right now.
Yes, do check out the Bioniq coupon code in the show notes. So on to the 5:30 game on Saturday, which you will get to watch on the telly at home. That's Aston Villa versus Chelsea, and I don't really want to talk about Villa. So, Mikey, Aston Villa, what do you reckon?
Yeah, so Villa are a tricky one. We've mentioned quite a lot about how Champions League football has affected their league form. To their detriment, maybe. I asked a really good question. I thought it was a good question anyway. Even if I do say so myself, as a Villa fan, would you prefer to do really well in the Champions League this year and get as far into that competition at the detriment of not getting any European football next season? Or would you prefer to concentrate on the league form to guarantee you're now a team that hits European football every season? So do you want to become a team that's known for being in European football, or just a one-hit wonder that does really well?
I mean, for the amount of times, us Liverpool fans have moaned about not winning the Premier League, one thing that you can always say is that they've played European football pretty much consistently, season in, season out, and it's worth so much money to a club. I think you have to prioritise finishing in a position where you know you get to do it again next year. Because in all honesty, nobody, even the most, biggest dreamers of Villa fans, is expecting them to win the Champions League. So I think you have to be pragmatic in that sense. And I thought they did the best business of the January transfer window. Maybe a bit too late. Maybe they should have done a bit more business at the front end of the season. But they are starting to look very good again. Nick, what do you reckon? Chelsea?
Before we move on to Chelsea, I was going to butt in and say a third option of going for the FA Cup. So many big teams are out of it. It feels like the first time in a long time we might get a FA Cup winner outside the top six. I'm hoping for like Villa, Forest, or a Fulham, Palace sort of team to win the FA Cup. So I think that third option's the best for them. I assume you're going to go on to Chelsea.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to talk too much about Villa because of what happened during the week, but I think that Rashford down the left is looking like a really good signing. I'm pleased for everyone involved, for United, for Villa, for him, that he's doing well, and I think he'll only get better. I was really pleased that Tielemans got man of the match. I thought, I saw him at Wembley against England, and I thought he was fantastic, really underrated player. And it's nice to see Villa doing well. I've said that on this podcast many times before. Chelsea, Nick, they've been inconsistent.
Yeah, 9 points from their last 9 games it's even worse than I feel like people have realised. And yeah, they don't have anyone at the moment who's stepping up. Obviously, Nicholas Jackson's now injured. He sort of went with Palmer up front and then Nkunku in behind against Brighton last week, which I thought was a really odd decision. And there's this trend where Palmer's not really like helping the team as much, and he needs help, but I think he also needs to sort of pick it up himself as well, because we saw we've seen how good he can be, but at the moment I'm watching him and it doesn't always look like he's wanting the ball or sort of driving the team forward. So I think Palmer needs to step it up, but he needs some help from his wingers, and if it's going to be Nkunku behind him or in front of him, whatever Maresca goes for, like, he needs a bit of help.
If I could just jump in really quickly, however bad Chelsea have been, if you can imagine that they got the results that they needed in those last 9 games, they're only 3 points. Well, they're a point behind 4th place. They're 4 points behind 3rd, and that's considering how bad that form's been. So, you know, it's not all doom and gloom. If you look at it that way, if it continues that way, I completely agree. But there's a chance they could change their season around and end up in a Champions League spot for me.
That is the big one as well, is it? You know, the Champions League, that European football. Because we sat here not so many months ago and looked at what on earth was going on at Chelsea in terms of the transfer window, the squad size, etc. And we're like, what can possibly happen? And we were pleasantly surprised by what was happening. And of course, Cole Palmer has been a big part of that. 14 goals and 6 assists. But the Mirror has reported today, and I don't know how true this is, there is some sort of clause in Cole Palmer's contract at Chelsea that if they don't get Champions League football, then they should be open to accepting offers for him. Considering where they started the season, 6th now, as you said, actually not that far off a place. Do you think, Mikey, if they don't get Champions League, it's a failed season for Chelsea?
Yeah, I'd say so. They've put themselves in a position to be Champions League football next season. I think since Maresca said that they wouldn't win the league when they were in the title race, there has been a huge change in the atmosphere at Chelsea. And I think that's got something to do with the dip in form. But as I've just said, I think it's well up for it. For Forest to continue now for the next 13 games without, to continue this high level of producing results, I think it would be phenomenal. And the same goes for Bournemouth. So I think Chelsea have got the experience. They've definitely got the depth in squad to make sure that's a reasonable possibility for them.
Yeah, and they are chasing down a Nottingham Forest side. God, I love this league. Nottingham Forest are 3rd in the Premier League. They travel to Newcastle on Sunday for the 2:00 kickoff. Newcastle have got a chance of silverware. It's all happening. I love a bit of romance in football, but they've not had some good results recently. Forest at Fulham and Newcastle on the receiving end of a fantastic hat-trick from Mamouche. I can't make out what's happening at Newcastle. I'm really pleased what's happening with Forest. Nick, this is a big game, Newcastle Forest, right? 3rd versus 7th.
It feels like both teams need a win to sort of steady the ship. They're both on sort of, it's not bad form yet, but it could head that way very quickly. So I think a win here is massive for both teams' Champions League aspirations as well. Obviously, Forest are in a pretty nice position at the moment, but to expect them to keep doing this, and it feels like we're saying this every week, so maybe they will keep doing this. But there's cracks beginning to show possibly for Forest, and this is a massive chance for Newcastle to steady the ship, get going again. Because when I spoke to Ian from the Newcastle podcast, when we were talking about the Arsenal-Newcastle semi-final, he was saying how last time they got to the Carabao Cup final, that period between the semi-final and the final, they were awful because they were so focused on that final that everything else dropped off a cliff. So they really need to make sure that doesn't happen again. And I think this game could be huge for that sort of like form.
Yeah, it does feel like a distraction already for them. We have sung Forest's praises a lot during this podcast over this season. Mikey, what is it? What is bringing Forest to 3rd in the table, still in with a shout, still defying all the odds week in, week out?
I think they've got a unity within the squad and a belief that they rely on each other, and it's definitely there to see on the pitch. However, I think this game will probably be one of the more interesting ones of the weekend. Not necessarily from the result or the perspective of the game, but if you look at their recent games, so Newcastle played City away and lost 4-0. And not only did they lose 4-0, but they looked awful. Like they didn't create anything. They allowed City goals, and they made City look like the old City that we were used to watching. And then the same for Forest. If you watch the Fulham game, there was nothing in that game that was for Forest. They took advantage of one mistake and they got a deflection that pushed the goal into. I mean, Chris Wood's unbelievable. He's on fire. He should be in the international squad again at 30. How old is he? 64 now or something. He's been around for time, that guy. But Fulham were brilliant, I thought. But Forest had no answer to what they were offering. Adam Traore absolutely obliterated them, in my opinion. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how both of these teams kick on. I think as a league, from a league point of view, for Newcastle it's less important. For Forest, it's really important. I think Newcastle can probably. They're not going to be consistent enough, to get European football. So I think they're going to struggle to maintain that. Whereas Forest are in a really great position, but away days like this will be the true test.
Yeah, I think so. And Forest have travelled okay this season, and we know St James's Park can be a real test. But I do think that the Magpies have got one eye on another way into Europe. I think they're eyeing up that Carabao Cup final, and that is a distraction. We talked about what happened to them at the hands of Manchester City, and we're going to have a look at Manchester City hosting Liverpool right after we hear about Zencastr.
Do you have a story to tell that the world needs to hear? Have you struggled with reaching new audiences who are engaged with your story? It might be time for you to start a podcast. Let me tell you about the platform we use here at Global Sports Podcast Network. Zencastr makes it easy to start a high-quality podcast built for growth from day one. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes ums, ahs, ya knows, and 22 other speech patterns, Zencastr makes it super easy to start a podcast that sounds great. Ready to tell your story? Check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr.
Yes, do check out Zencastr, a long-time sponsor of the Global Sports Podcast Network, to start telling your story today. The story of the season so far for me is Liverpool top of the league, and dare I say it, could be champions. But Manchester City, big win in the league recently, got torn apart by Real Madrid in the week. But I don't think there's a club in the world that wouldn't have been torn apart by Real Madrid, to be honest. I think they are absolutely another level. As a Liverpool fan, I'm looking at this game and I'm a bit worried, to be honest. I think City are back with a little bit of bite, a little bit of something to prove. I think the Real Madrid game's just going to wind them up even more. And they'd love to stick it to a rival team. Nick, Man City, do you reckon it's comeback time, just in time for the big guns?
It's sort of cracks versus cracks and sort of inconsistency for City. Like we saw how good City can be last week against Newcastle. They sort of helped a little bit by really bad defending, but then straight back to what we've seen all season against Real Madrid. Like you say, anyone probably would have lost to Madrid on that day, but it's the same thing. It's like getting played in behind and they can't play against teams who turn them. So I think this game's going to be decided by counter-attacks. If Haaland's back and they have that Haaland dragging defenders one way and Marmoush running into the space behind, that could be huge for City. But then long balls to Salah like we saw against Villa, if he can get a bit of help, maybe Gakpo can be back, then this is so difficult to call. I think you have to favour Liverpool because we've seen enough terrible City performances this season that one game against Newcastle we can't necessarily pay much attention to. They did the same thing to Forest around Christmas and then we're straight back to being pretty bad. So I hope City can do something from an Arsenal perspective, but it's difficult to ignore what Salah can potentially do, especially with the deficiencies of City.
Yeah, Salah's on one for breaking records this season. You mentioned Gakpo, 50-50 to be back for Sunday, but also Haaland, that knee injury didn't look good at all. I mean, no one was near him and he just kind of collapsed. So it's a real sad state of affairs to see. I mean, I do hope he's not back for Sunday, but I do hope for the sake of everybody who loves watching football that he's back and firing on all cylinders again. Mikey, Kusanov, new centre-back, 20 years old for City. He'll have his work cut out, won't he?
Yeah, definitely. I'm quite excited to see quite a few of the new signings. Mamouche coming back off a hat-trick from the last league game. I think he looks like a very tasty footballer. Riyad Mahrez-esque back in the day for me. I think this is a game that could go either way. Liverpool have lost one game this season. So it's hard to look at them and see them being defeated. That being said, it's a very, very difficult game to call. It'll be interesting. A Liverpool loss and an Arsenal win would put 5 points between them with a game in hand. And for every neutral in the country or anyone who despises Liverpool, would hope that is what will happen. We'll have 2 points into the running, and someone like Salah will do a Steven Gerrard slip and let Demba Ba in again. I mean, that'd just be beautiful.
Oh God!
Van Dijk slips and Mikel Merino runs in behind at Anfield to.
I am shaking. Yeah, it's not a glitch. I am literally shaking at the prospect of this. This is the perpetual fear that Liverpool fans of a certain age live in, because we're not used to this. We're not used to being this close to securing a Premier League title. I gotta say, I feel like City could win this. I hope it finishes 1-1 or a Liverpool win, but I feel like it could finish 2-1 Manchester City, and it would just be another kind of twist in the tail. We're starting to see now, can squads hold on? Can they survive a particularly grueling season? We're starting to see the calendar getting really packed now, and this is where teams will start to drop points. So I really hope you're wrong, Mikey. But I have a horrible...
You talk about squads. Liverpool's feels like the only one that has hung on. It doesn't. I'm sure Liverpool have had more injuries than I necessarily realised, but it feels like you've got away with like having a consistent 11 all season. That's ultimately been the difference. So
yeah, absolutely agree. And there's I think it's from finals. The new kind of one of the backroom staff, they reckon that's really helping kind of manage Liverpool's injuries, but also Slot's in-game management. He's not afraid to make substitutions. At the 60-minute mark, 65-minute mark, we saw Trent score a screamer against Villa and then get hooked pretty shortly afterwards because he needs to manage these players' times. Jota is, as much as I love him, a fragile player, putting 90 minutes under his belt still very, very risky. And I agree, it is the difference. And it's also why, coming back to your point, Mikey, I think you have to prioritise Europe because teams need the money to invest in their squads or they can't compete. And it's, the sad state of football at the moment is, can you compete? I think at one point this season, Bournemouth had 12 players out injured. I think they had less players training than they did in the entire squad, which is like insane. But that's the level, the intensity of this amazing league. Nick, Mikey, that's all we've got time for today. We've got a hell of a lot of fantastic games to look forward to. Match day 26. If you can watch just one, Nick, what are you watching? Obviously not Arsenal, West Ham, one apart from that.
It has to be City Liverpool. There's no other game. If City can get a win, suddenly Arsenal's tails are up. They're smelling blood, and this league's so on.
Yeah, I think that is the pick of the bunch. Mikey, you probably don't want to watch Everton Man United, but apart from that, what would be yours?
I'm going to stick with the Newcastle Forest game. Purely that, you know, the underdogs of the season continue to do exceptionally well, and Chris Wood continues to be my hero.
Oh yeah, what a hero he is! I'm really enjoying the Chris Wood saga, and long may it continue. They might even make a film about it. I think they did the same for Vardy with the Leicester win many years ago. Or certainly they talked about it. I don't know if they did it in the end. So yeah, if anybody's looking to produce a Chris Woods film, you know, I'll happily throw my hat in the ring to be involved in some way or another. Anyway, it's been wonderful chatting football with you guys again. Thank you to Nick Bird.
Thank you thank you.
And to Mikey Thompson.
Yeah, pleasure to be back, lads. I'll see you again soon. Hopefully our predictions are better than the other week.
And of course, you can check out more predictions, more football talk, and everything else on the Global Sports Podcast Network. You've been listening to the Daily English Premier League Show.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.